The best of the week on Relevant Radio.
Are you getting married soon? And I'm talking to you, our listeners, or is someone in your family getting married or thinking of doing it here during these summer months? There are absolutely some things that you should talk about with your significant other to put all the cards on the table before the wedding day. Joining us live this morning is licensed marriage and family therapist Doug Hinderer to share the top 5 things that a couple should know before they get married. Doug's passion is working with couples to help them live the married life that God intended from the beginning. Doug himself has been married for 42 plus years to his incredible wife, Shirley. They have 9 children and 6 grandchildren. You can find Doug at happymarriageforlife.com. Doug, thanks so much for joining us. Doug, you have not only been counseling, but you've been living at 42 plus years. I believe that's going on 43 that you've been married. Yeah. You've come up with these 5 things that couples should know. How did you come up with these 5 ideas?
Well, that's a good question. And it was really hard to narrow it down to just 5 because there's a lot more than 5. And I just a little commercial plug. By the end of this month on my website, I will have a marriage prep workshop out there for couples who are trying to discern marriage. And it will go into all of the things that you need to talk about. But so I grabbed 5 out of that list. I don't know these are the top 5, but I think they're 5 really important ones. And the first one is, I think, and I do believe this is probably one of the most important ones, is what are your future spouse's defects? What are you going to have to live with for the rest of your life? And you know, we all have our defects. You know, we come into this world with the original sin. And I'm up to now 7 grandchildren, John, and my daughter, who has a 1-month-old, and her husband were over yesterday for a visit. And you look at that little 1-month-old baby, and he looks perfect. It's like, oh, this kid is perfect. But, you know, he's going to get a personality someday, and defects will show up. And you know, and we have different temperaments and interests, and devil's always trying to pull us in a different direction. And so the person you're going to marry has defects, and it really, success in life and marriage often boils down to marrying someone whose defects you can live with. And so it's important to try to identify what those defects are.
Well, how challenging is it to even talk about some of those defects with your significant others? That means that they actually need to discuss one's shortcomings.
Yeah, and it's really difficult because love is blind. You know, when you're deeply in love and you're infatuated with this person and you want to spend the rest of your life with them, you're blind to that person's defects. So one piece of advice I give people is ask your family and your friends what they think about this person you're thinking about marrying, because they love you, but they are not blind to your future spouse's defects. And, you know, if your friends and family are saying, hey, you got a good one there, don't let that one get away, that's a really good sign. But if they're scratching their head saying, man, you should think twice about this one, we're not sure about this person, you need to listen to that advice for sure, because they're seeing something you're not, because you're blinded by your love.
And sometimes our parents have that sixth sense. They can sense that something's not right.
Especially dad, I think, because dad's job is to protect his children, right? Especially his daughters. And so if dad, especially if you girls out there, if dad's not sure about this boy you're bringing around, you need to listen to dad, because he's probably at least sensing something that isn't too good. So some of the defects, I think, that really lead to a lot of trouble in marriage are anger, right? If you're marrying somebody who's angry a lot, that's hard to go through life with somebody who's just always upset about something. You're walking on pins and needles, always afraid something bad will happen. Anger's not good. You know, abusing alcohol and drugs, that's a really bad sign. Alcohol is a very dangerous drug within marriage. Over 50% of all domestic abuse happens, there's alcohol involved. And something like 70% of domestic murders, alcohol is involved. So someone who doesn't, moderate their alcohol consumption can be a difficult person to go through life with. You know, negativity, constantly complaining, you know, nothing ever makes them happy. That's tough. Selfishness, scorekeeping. Scorekeeping is one of those things that makes it hard to go through life, because I'm always measuring what I'm doing for you versus what you're doing for me, and you never do as much for me as I do for you. Scorekeeping can be a pretty tough thing to go through life with as well.
These things, and you just mentioned, some pretty obvious ones that are not good for a marriage. Do you suggest that the couples talk about anger issues, or if somebody does drink too much, or perhaps likes to smoke a joint on a regular basis, they have this discussion before they get married.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because it doesn't get better, after you're married. There's this kind of fallacy out there that, well, the bad things will get better after we're married because things will calm down. And no, that's not. Just because you go through a ceremony for an hour on a Saturday, that's not going to change a person's basic temperament, disposition, and their defects. So, yeah, but I think, in my workshop, I spend a lot of time helping couples have these conversations and actually guiding them through how to do it. Yeah, these are difficult conversations, but really, really important.
And obviously selfishness is something that would be very evident, right from the beginning. If it's all just me, and, take.
Yeah, oh, for sure. But part of the problem is, well, I really love you and I want to make you happy. And if you want to go to this movie and not that one, sure, I'll do it and I'll do it. But if you find yourself constantly having to do what the other person wants to do and they're not taking your interests into account, that's not a good thing. And so this ties into the second point I've got. Does your spouse know how to love? And, love is one of those things that's kind of hard to define because, I love my wife, but I love pizza. And, do I love them both the same? And if I have to choose between my wife and pizza, what am I going to choose? But, C.S. Lewis helps us out a great deal in this, and he talks about 4 different loves. And when I'm working with, couples who might get married, I say, you need to score each other out on all 4 of these. And the score needs to be at least 80% or better on each of these, or the relationship is really going to struggle. And so the first one is the love of friendship, philia, which is, is my heart safe with you? Do you know how to be a good friend? Do you affirm me and build me up? And do we have things we enjoy doing in common? And, do I feel good when I'm with you because our friendship is so deep and I can open my heart up to you and you open your heart up to me, and we're very safe with each other emotionally. And so friendship is really important. The second one is storge, which is gentleness and kindness. It's easy to go through life with someone who's kind, who's constantly doing little acts of service. They notice when your coffee cup is half empty and they just come over and top it off for you. They open car doors and they tell you what a wonderful person you are. They compliment you and they smile at you. And so this gentleness, this kindness, this ability to do little acts of kindness throughout the day is really critical to building a happy life together. And of course, there's eros, which is the physical expressions of love. And this is far more than just, the marital embrace. This is, does this person know how to give me a hug when I'm feeling sad? Can they give me a neck rub if I've had a tough day? Do they hold my hand when we walk down the street? So do they know how to show love in physical but yet chaste ways, which is an important thing. And then finally, I think the most important of them, although they're all very important, is agape, this sacrificial, this unconditional love. And, Jesus is our role model for what that looked like. And you saw a really good picture of that at the Last Supper when he washed the feet of the disciples, even though Peter was going to curse and swear a couple hours, so he didn't know him. Judas was going to take those clean feet and go sell Jesus, and the other 10 were going to use those clean feet to run as far away from him as he could. His love for them was unconditional. And that's ultimately what has to be present in a marriage if it's going to last and be sustained. It's got to be unconditional because you will do things that will hurt me. Not intentionally, probably, but still, and I need to be able to forgive and love unconditionally. And so it's a good idea to have a conversation about all 4 of those and score out your prospective partner and say, man, how do you do on all 4 of these?
How difficult is it to put a number on love? You're suggesting an 80% score, but I mean, in terms of these 4 loves, what about when the physical attraction part, the eros, is way more overpowering than the agape part? Is that a red flag?
Huge red flag, because if you're out of line there in the eros part, you don't get a chance to develop the friendship and the kindness because your time is being consumed on the eros. And the sad truth is couples are violating that 6th commandment really very early in their relationships. And then they're really not developing the friendship and the storge. And so when I'm working with couples, it's 90%, and it's just staggering. And when I'm working with them, I say, you know what, why don't you just take 30 days off and focus on the friendship and the storge? And you may discover, wow, the eros part of this relationship is pretty good, but the other 2, not so good. It may be time to move on then. So you don't want to get the eros piece out of order because it really makes it hard to evaluate the other kinds of love.
Doug, we've talked about the first couple of things. What is the third thing that a couple should know before they get married?
And this one might sound a little counterintuitive, I think, to your audience, but I think you need to have a conversation about how your future spouse feels about divorce. Divorce is a sad reality in our world, and we know that 4 out of 10 first-time marriages end in divorce, right? And every one of those couples, they took this vow that said, till death do us part, and yet in 4 out of 10, one of those said, you know what, there's something going on here that absolves me of that vow. I no longer have to honor that vow, and I feel justified in breaking that vow and divorcing you. It's tough, but I think it's a good conversation to have. So, I asked the question, do you see divorce as a reasonable option in certain circumstances? Under what circumstances would you consider divorcing me? What would that look like? And to have that conversation. I did a little internet search, and there's a site out there called divorce.com, and it lists the most common reasons why couples get divorced. The second most common reason is lack of commitment. I just wasn't committed to you. That's a head scratcher, right? I promised till death do us part, but really I'm not all that committed to this thing. And as soon as I'm not happy, I think I'm going to move on. And so an awful lot of people get divorced because they say, well, this marriage was a mistake because I'm just not happy. Is that, in your mind, a reasonable justification to end our marriage and to divorce? And I think it's important to have that conversation.
Absolutely. Doug, would you say that fear of divorce is part of the reason why a lot of people are just not getting married these days?
Oh, yeah. You know what? I think that's right because so many kids now have grown up in a divorced home.
Exactly.
And, and when I work with these couples that do marriage prep, they're like, Doug, you got to help us because we don't want to put our kids through what we had to go through when our parents split up, which is right. And the statistic, I came across this the other day. On average, each year, there's 100,000 Catholic weddings. In 1960, 60 years ago, there were 400,000 Catholic weddings. And so you're right. Even in our church, people aren't getting married because I think there's this fear of this commitment and they see so much divorce. Like, how can I guarantee that I'm not going to be one of those statistics?
Doug, what is the fourth thing that couples should know before they get married?
Yeah, number 4 is how do you feel about money? It's not about money. It's about what money means. There's 2 kinds of people in the world. There's spenders and there's savers. And the spender feels, listen, life is to be enjoyed, and you have to spend money to enjoy life. And so I will be spending money to, go out to dinner and have nice clothes and drive a nice car, et cetera. Savers, money is about security. It's about safety. I have to have a certain amount of money in the bank or I can't sleep at night. I have to be saving for my kids' college education, et cetera. So when a saver marries a spender, there's going to be a lot of conflict there. And so you need to know how your future spouse feels about money. But even if 2 spenders or 2 savers marry, there's going to be conflict because they might disagree on what to spend their money on or how much money to save and where to put it and what we're saving for. So there's going to be a lot of conflict around money. And unless you're independently wealthy and you don't care about it, there's going to be conflict. You need to talk about it and make sure you're kind of as aligned as possible.
And how you deal with money, how you feel about money affects the 5th thing that couples should know about getting married.
Good point. And that's how do you feel about children? We're living in a society, in a world where children aren't embraced. They're not welcomed. A lot of couples, a child is something I just attach to my life, kind of like I do a car or a new home. It's just an attachment. As opposed to the reason that we're married, the reason for our existence. And, the very first commandment recorded in Scripture, I think it's the 18th line of Genesis, God said, be fruitful and multiply. He created marriage as the vehicle through which we could participate in his act of creation and bring new life into the world. And so you need to be very much aligned on openness to life. It is the purpose of marriage. And so it's a really important conversation to have as well.
Should the conversation be, how many children you ideally would love to have together?
Yes, for sure. That's a really important thing. And how many is too many? We could have an entire program just on this, John. But, God will provide. And there's this fear that, we don't have enough money for more children. God will provide. This openness, God is never outdone in charity. Every human life we bring into this world is a gift we give to God. we now create this baby he's going to breathe an immortal soul into, which is destined to live with him for all of eternity. It's our gift to God.
And these are some very practical suggestions that you have here this morning. Where can our listeners go to sign up for your marriage prep workshop?
Yeah, happymarriageforlife.com. And by the end of the month, my workshop should be there. And I hope it can make a big difference and really help a lot of seriously dating, engaged couples make good choices here.
Doug, as always, really appreciate your perspective. Thanks so much for being with us.
Always happy to be here, John. Thanks so much.
Morning Air contributor Doug Hinderer, licensed marriage and family therapist.